Greetings, good humans, and welcome to Tabletop Alchemy, where sometimes we do something different with the camera and the frame rate and the microphone, and we're at the computer desk, which is not normally the desk that we're at. And we also thank our patrons for supporting such radical changes to their consistent, always consistent Tabletop Alchemy programming. I even threw up some fake vines, fake ivy, to hide the stupid... Yeah, I don't know why I wanted to try to shoot it this way, other than putting the 24mm lens up close, and so you could see my nose get even bigger. But, so today we're shooting on a 100mm lens from a weird angle. I'm looking at a computer screen. I don't know what I'm saying. I have no script. You know how I am with no script. We're in trouble. Both of us. All right, let's get down to brass tacks here. Brass tacks. I don't even know what that phrase means. The bottom line is, today is Tuesday, October 1st. Yesterday was Monday. So yesterday marks exactly 2 weeks of me having started working on the Rangers of Shadow Deep screenplay. In order to get that show on the road, we need a story. We need a script. Maybe not, we don't even need technically an actual finished script, but we need a story. We need to know what the story... We need to know what the story is that we're telling. So from there can stem everything else, right? Locations and casting and budgeting and all that other stuff, right? So, of course, I've been working on this story vaguely in the back of my mind. I mean, I have my magnetic board over there that I got a few months ago and put up for my 3x5-inch cards. And, I kind of use that to a certain extent. But at some point, I just need to sit down and write the treatment. Now, a treatment for a screenplay is essentially an outline, or a lot of people define it in different ways, but it's basically, I don't know, it can be anywhere from 5 to 15, 20 pages of kind of in prose, usually with no dialogue. It's just describing out the story beats. It's like an outline. It's like a prose version of an outline that explains your story on paper. And that's what I set out to do, starting 2 weeks ago on a Monday, whatever day that was. I know what the screenplay format is. I understand 3-act structure, but I'm not good at the craft of kind of anything. I'm not good at the craft of things. I've written, I've co-written a couple of features. Throughout the processes of those particular projects, I did not bother to learn the craft of screenwriting. I didn't go into the 3-act structure and blah, blah. Because kind of when you tell a story, if it ends up working correctly and it's kind of in the same time frame, you're going to kind of end up with that structure anyway. That's just kind of the nature of storytelling. So I wasn't really stressed about that. I didn't really know enough about it. I didn't go to school for it. Anyway, but I've always been writing. That's the first thing I started to think I wanted to be as a kid. In 4th grade, I wrote my first, let's be honest, I plagiarized my first short story. I didn't know that I liked image making because I never had a camera. We couldn't afford that kind of stuff. So anyway, but I was always about writing. So I've written lots of things, nothing, fantastic or published or stuff like that. Right. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that I have some idea of how to approach screenwriting. I'm very aware of the things that I know that I suck at and the things that I would like to get good at. And to be perfectly honest, I know there's probably a bunch of things that I'm not going to be able to get good at in time for this. So I always planned to work with a co-writer on this screenplay. But anyway, I set out to write the treatment, and I was like, okay, starting 2 weeks ago on that Monday, I told myself, okay, you got to put yourself on a schedule. You got to do a minimum of 2 hours, which doesn't sound, I know that sounds minuscule, but when you have to do hard things, it's tough to get yourself to going I'm going to do 8 hours every day, because you don't want to get into that cycle of failing, constant feeling like a failure. So I told myself I got to do a minimum of 2 hours every day. I would much more prefer to have gotten 4 hours of work done directly on the treatment. I would literally set up a timer. I just used a clock timer here on my Mac or whatever. I'd set it for 50 minutes. Then I would go and write for 50 minutes. And sometimes it was really hard to keep writing. I'd check that timer and be like, dang, I've only been writing for 10 minutes? This is terrible. But, I do my 50 minutes, get up and take my 10-minute break, and then come back and do 50 more minutes, etc. You guys have kind of seen, if you're familiar with the Silver Bayonet stuff that I've done where I've done just kind of pseudo screenwriting, kind of nonsense, just to have fun with it. I kind of just write that stuff off the cuff and just have fun with it. And that's how I do it. I've shown how I kind of write stories before or whatever, where I just vomit stuff on the page, just start typing and let stuff flow. I don't know how to share. I want to share the process of filmmaking. I've already explained that I want to show from A to Z making a movie, right? And I am not clear on how to show the screenwriting process, because A, it's not visually interesting or entertaining. I mean, it's not visual. It's a bunch of words, right? And B, I'm extremely self-conscious about showing anything like this in this stage of like the first stages of development, because there's going to be just a bunch of cheesy stuff. Like, it's going to be terrible. So we're not going to sit here and read what I've written. I just want to show you kind of what the process, where I'm at in the process, because for all intents and purposes, I haven't left my apartment in 2 weeks, and I've been writing, and it kind of picked up speed as I was going, and I was putting more hours into it, and I was getting into it. I'm really into it now. I'm almost done. I kind of use it as an excuse to slack on my daily workouts and my other daily routines. I've kind of like, I don't know, I just got to get this done, so it's okay to like slack on these things. Whatever. We all trick ourselves into things. So I'm not proud, but that's the way it is. All right, so we're gonna jump into Scrivener here. I use Scrivener. It's available for Windows and Mac. I've been using it on Mac for a long time. I really enjoy it as a writing software. It does do screenplay format as well, but we're going to talk about that a bit. I'm not going to use it to actually format the screenplay. It's a cool word too, right? For writing program, Scrivener. Okay, so this is Scrivener has a bunch of different ways to look at your project when you've got it laid out here. We can look at things like this. We can look at it in an outline. I'm going to use we're trying to use the 3-act structure, but we use 4 acts because it's kind of, it's basically, if you were to say like a movie's 120 minutes long, act 1 is a fourth of that, right? Because you have the first act and the third act are each a quarter length of the movie as a whole, roughly speaking. And then the middle section is basically half of the thing, so act 2. But a lot of people sometimes take act 2, slice it in half, and you've got the midpoint. So then there's act 1, act 2, act 3, act 4. So that's what I decided to use, just because it's kind of symmetrical to me. Anything to help me slice it up even more, to be able to keep squeezing down into various chunks of it, is just helpful. So that's how I kind of arranged this. So yeah, so we have act 1, and then I can drill down into, these are not sequences as far as filming sequences. These are story chunk sequences, sort of. Like for this movie, I want a cold open that is this crazy action scene. It's basically a prologue. It's a scene of something that has happened before the main story starts. Not like a long time before, by any means. It actually features the main character, and we meet her right away, but we're seeing her experience something terrible that she goes through, and then we'll go into the title sequence, which I have an idea for what I want to do for the title sequence now. When we click on these things on the sides, then it goes to the actual chunks, and then if I want to see these like actually laid out, these are all like basically sub documents of the whole document. So I can just click this and then we can see the full document. So as you can see here, I went, my whole thing of writing just little outline things for the story quickly turned into, I don't know, like 70% screenplay at this point. I'm jumping all over the place. I don't know if this making any sense. It's probably not, but I'm down here as far as writing wise. I'm down here, this thing down here. I'm in the final descent sort of thing. I'm about to write the final battle. Like I've written up to the point, like here's the last thing I wrote just for fun. The trees flanking the warband explode with vine puppets. A big old fight's about to start and our heroes are going to be in trouble. This was so difficult for me to start and get a hand and just like start working on this as a project, like start writing the stupid thing instead of just messing around like, oh, someday I'm going to get to it. I had to just I had to give myself permission to just go and do it. Stop worrying about the budget. Stop worrying about what's supposed to be treatment format. I mean, I literally had to tell myself, stop worrying about the budget, because it was literally stopping me from writing anything. Because how can I worry about the budget or fit things to a budget when I don't know what the budget is? Now, I understand that I'm trying to find a minuscule amount of money, and what I've written here is probably a $50 million movie. But I can't care. It doesn't matter. Get the story down. Get a story down. Let yourself create the environment that will allow you to start writing. I mean, there are some things that I'm like very conscious of budget-wise. Like, I'm not going to write in certain things. But overall, I had to just stop worrying about the budget and just write scenes out. I mean, I already have all the characters, and now we have 2 new characters. I mean, there's a stack of characters in here. There's tons of things I'm doing wrong with this. Just because as I'm fleshing scenes out, and I guess that's just the way that I work. I have to write it out and see what it's like. Like, I can imagine rough overviews of things, but then to actually understand what it's going to really be like, I have to write it out. And so as I wrote these scenes out, like, I knew there was going to be a field marshal, right? You know, somebody who's in command of a big chunk of the army, right? To give the mission or whatever, right? That's happening in this story. So as I'm writing these scenes and developing the character, the story out, more speaking parts have popped up in this, and there are a lot, which is just nonsense. But we did the character brief, and I outlined 6 characters plus the villain with all their backstory. But I always knew, and it's even noted in that character brief, that there were going to be 2 recruits or 2 extra warband members, right, for our Rangers of Shadow Deep warband. They're going to be essentially Star Trek red shirts, right? I need a couple people that we can kill off in the course of the movie that we don't. So I didn't develop those characters. I just knew there were going to be 2 extra people, and I knew there were probably going to be recruits of some type, because I just like the idea of that. It's kind of neat to show the recruiting process, whatever. Again, you see, I could talk about this for as long as it took me to write it. You know, Roya has gone off to recruit a couple of people to fill out the warband roster. Well, then I had to name them. I had to come up with those characters, and you know, I wrote them up really quick for this scene. And as time goes on, and I write the other scenes throughout, you know, as I end up writing this whole movie, of course, those 2 characters that were no name or whatever, they're just going to be abused by the Shadow Deep. But they became real characters. They don't necessarily have the backstories. I could write backstories for them now, because now I know them. I haven't written like this in quite a long time. But I actually went and developed on paper, on an actual Ranger warband sheet, I wrote up all of the characters as actual, following in-game rules. So here's our main character, Roy Ardenfall, right? She's been promoted to Ranger. Why does she have so many recruitment points? Because I did some math here, and I kind of cheated a tiny bit, and I notated that where I cheated. But I tried to balance it. I tried to make it as balanced as possible, but I also need to have 8 characters in the warband for the movie. I took some limitations. That's why I delved into this book here, where I started, because I based a lot of the characters on the archetypes in this book. Some of the characters are veterans. So like, I built a character, Annika, she's got 50 progression points. And so I doped out all of her skills and abilities as I built it off of the rules. Okay, if you had 50 progression points, you get to pick, you know, these different things and add them on. And she has some of the traits and stuff like that. Now, she is an interesting character that maybe if you're hardcore, you know, a rules lawyer, that you might have a problem with this particular character, because I literally made her a hybrid of Chthonian Mage and Scroll Master. I tried to not make her OP. I tried to really put down to trade off the ability to let her only take certain things. And that was very specific because of her character, the way I wrote her backstory and what she's in search of and the way that she's done things. That's what her character is. She went to the Scroll Masters and studied with them, and then she left them and went to the Chthonian Mages and studied with them. But anyway, everyone else is fairly straightforward, right? We got Sebastian, our actual veteran, and he's got 100 progression points because he's old. He's actually retiring, right? He's like a 55-year-old warrior that's beaten up, and he's been in the Shadow Deep for a long time. So he's got some interesting things, you know, stats and abilities. A lot of these don't really like get highlighted specifically in the movie, because the movie's a movie to watch and enjoy. It's not something where we're going to pick out. Anyway, something else that helped me get started, because when I started writing the treatment, you know, I had a couple of ideas of the opening scene and stuff, and then I was just like I knew the first act. I knew what the first act had to be, right? The first act is easy. The first act has to be the war band being assembled, and then they go to the Shadow Deep. At that point, that's where the story just becomes so wide open, right? Where I had to come up with what is going to happen, right, in the Shadow Deep, but it's so wide open where you could go, and I was crippled by that at the beginning of these 2 weeks ago or whatever. And the way that I got over that, I was like, maybe I should come up with, what if this story that I'm writing for the screen, what if this story was actually, if I broke this out into a DLC, I keep calling it DLC, an expansion for the game. Here's a mission. And that's what these guys have. They have a mission. And inside that mission are several scenarios that they have to accomplish or go through, right? And each one that they go through impacts how the next one occurs, if there are penalties or whatever, right? So I didn't take it to the nth degree by any means, but the first thing is I did sit down and I banged out this list of scenarios that if I was going to write up a custom mission for my friends to play based on what this movie idea is, you know, I just wrote up these sort of things here, and I was like, that's pretty cool. But it was totally enough to get me started. And there are certain things that are definitely in this story. Like, yes, we have I have the Enter the Shadow Deep, the cliff wall, encountering gnolls, which I can't actually make gnolls, so I did it a special way. Encountering gnolls is in the main story. The abandoned village, which, how am I going to do an abandoned village for a low budget movie? We're not going to ask these questions right now. I just had to get writing. And so that abandoned village, it's in there. That scenario is in there. They reach the site, the X on the map, whatever. That's in there. We have some cultists with a ritual with the druid. That's in there. And boy, that was a fun scene to write. Am I going to be able to shoot that way? The way that I wrote it? Very, very low chance of that ever happening. I mean, I wrote the hell out of that scene as far as production design goes and expensive stuff. Yeah, but that's in there. And then the last thing, the Cops Cathedral. That's just something that I call the location of the final battle. And that's in there too. So all of these things are in there, actually. So it really did work. There's a lot of extra stuff, of course. And I don't know, there's a bunch of other stuff I could talk about. But really, I just wanted to share this with you so that I documented at least the initial attempt at writing the story. So that can be documented for the movie, but also to, you know, kind of share the ideas, not specific ideas, but sort of the idea of getting over a block and trying to work on a bigger project where it's like overwhelming, and really the idea of just giving yourself permission to just have fun with something. You can always tweak something after the fact or try to make something workable after you've got at least something down to work with. Until you have something to work with, it's difficult to work with it. It's time for tequila. I've also been having tequila once or twice an hour. Not really. Maybe. No, I'm kidding. I did have tequila with my Trader Joe's jalapeno limeade a couple of times throughout the course of the week. But anyway, yeah, that's it. So yeah, this is a weird tabletop alchemy video. I'm going to sign off now because I have to go back to work on this. All right. See ya.